اللهم ارحمني برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. أما بعد, respected brothers, we've been talking about the allegations made against the Sahaba, primarily against Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, Hazrat Hafsa radiallahu anha, and the rest of the Sahaba. Alhamdulillah, we've covered numerous allegations made in the film Lady of Heaven, made by the Shias against these noble people, these noble Sahaba, these friends, father-in-laws, cousins, relatives of the Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, once again, I'd just like to remind you that the difference of the reasons behind the breakup of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the Shia is a matter of it's a narrative. The Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they have a narrative. The Shias, they have a narrative. And I mentioned in the first one why the Shia narrative is false, doesn't make sense, doesn't show reality. There's no factual basis for that reality, because when we look at the life of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam left the world, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fulfilled the promises made to the Sahaba in the time of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, then it's very, very, very clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved the Sahaba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Sahaba to be companions of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He chose the Sahabiyat to be the wives and daughters and relatives and cousin sisters of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, it was a bit detailed, but last lesson I mentioned the relationship between the children of the Sahaba. One thing I'd like to mention, that even before we get to the children, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam had 4 daughters. And until very recently, about 150 years ago, that was the narrative portrayed. Some Shias, a couple of centuries back, they tried to claim that no, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam only had 1 daughter, Fatima. Or about the other 3, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum. No, they were the children of Hazrat Khadija al-Kubra radiallahu anha, and they were her children before she married Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam wrote on. Why do they say this? And why do they make this claim? Because their contention is, Hazrat Fatima al-Zahra radiallahu ta'ala, she is pure. And she is of pure blood. Her genes are pure. She is a part, as they say, she is a part of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam. She is the flesh, as in English, she is the flesh and blood of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That's why she was the greatest lady ever, and she superseded the Anbiya, and they put her on a pedestal in the same way that the Christians put Hazrat Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam as a semi-god, semi-god, and basically out of our comprehension, the rank given to Hazrat Fatima al-Zahra radiallahu ta'ala. Now, alhamdulillah, Sunnis, we have no problem. I mentioned this. Sunnis, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, every khutbah we mentioned that Fatima is the leader of the ladies of heaven. That's why the film was titled Lady of Heaven. And how did we know that? We knew from a narration by Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha. You claim they had great enmity. You claim the Sahaba hated the Ahl Bayt. And here Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu ta'ala anha, she's telling the world the greatest honor given to Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha is that she will be the leaders of the ladies of in heaven. Hazrat Aisha is telling us, if there was hatred, why would Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu ta'ala anha tell us? She would hide it. Anyway, now, and the other I mentioned was the intermarriages. Then because Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had 4 daughters, it's been, every history book has mentioned it. And in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nabi, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Ya ayyuhan nabi, qul li azwajika wa banatika. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran is the brilliant language you can ever find. And the miracle of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was the Quran because of the language of the Quran. The Quran itself, it challenges the poets and the Arabs of that time. That if you think this Quran is man-made, look at the language and you bring something like it. Does Allah Ta'ala not know how to address Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Does Allah Ta'ala not know that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam only had 1 daughter? Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala order Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam using azwaj? Ya Nabi qul, O Prophet, say to your wives and your daughters. If Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam only had 1 daughter, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ask him to address his daughters? And then we got the ahadith. And one of the reasons is because of this. If we say Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha was unique in her own right, it was her own taqwa. In Islam, somebody isn't given something just because their father was such and such. Every individual have to earn their own Jannah. They have to have their own taqwa. If he's the greatest saint, but if his son does not follow that path, and he goes astray, then Allah has no need of that son. In the same way, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he warned Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala in hadith, O Fatima, take care of your iman. It's what you have to do, every person. It's because amongst the Sahaba, there were sons accepting, fathers were rejecting. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his own uncles were rejecting. So, just because Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha was the daughter of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that's what she's given, that's tawheen on her. That's like she didn't have to do anything, no. She led an exemplary life. She led a life of poverty. She led a life of taqwa. She led a life of piety. And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted her the status of being Sayyidatul Nisa'i Ahlul Jannah. So we say, if it's only flesh and blood, then Hazrat Zainab radiallahu anha was also the flesh and blood of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Hazrat Ruqayya was also the flesh and blood of Hazrat Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Hazrat Kulthum was also the flesh and blood of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So why would Allah only choose one of the daughters and deprive the rest? So because of that, they've had to verbal gymnastics and play around with history and start making claims. And incredibly, it's not only the Shias making this claim, they get the non-Muslim Orientalists and then they get them to write these books. And there was a French writer, French Orientalist, and he wrote a book on this. And he was in the Western world, he was like one of the first ones to make this claim that the Prophet only had 1 daughter. Then he goes on to abuse Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala. He goes on to abuse Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But the Shia, they are so blinded and they are so eager to accept anything that will show the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's rest of the family, accepting Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha and Hazrat Ali by marrying Hazrat Fatima Zahra and their sons. The rest of the world they regard as the most evil people, astaghfirullah, and do kufr, takfir of them. Then, not only that, I mentioned Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha, she fell ill after Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed away. 6 months she was looked after by the wife of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu at that time. I've already mentioned this. Hazrat Ja'far, the elder brother of the Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, when he passed away in Muta, 8 after Hijri, his widow, Hazrat Asma bint Umays radiallahu anha, Hazrat Abu Bakr married her. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu was in charge of looking after her and making sure that she got married in the right place. He approached Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. He asked Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, will you marry the widow of my brother, my elder brother Ja'far? Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he agreed. And then they had a son. Then Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, about 4 years later, he passed away. And then Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he married this Asma bint Umays radiallahu anhu. But before that, Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha, she lived for 6, and this was this Asma, when she was the wife of the Prophet Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu anha, at the grief and separation of her father, she fell ill and she was buried for 6 months, and then she passed away. She was looked after by this Asma bint Umays, the wife. At that time, she was the wife of the Prophet Siddiq radiallahu anhu. What hatred! You're saying that the Abu Bakr hated the Ahl Bayt, and he's giving his own wife day and night. She's there serving Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha. And then just before Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha, she passed away. She had young children. Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhu, they were only, and she had other children. And they were only what? 11, 12, 13 years old. Maybe about 10 years old. 9, 10 years old. So I'm saying, Hazrat Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha said, she asked Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, she advised Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu that you need somebody to help you raise our children. And then she herself said, I suggest you marry Umama bint Abil As. You marry Umama bint Abil As. Who is Umama bint Abil As? Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha, she had 3 sisters. Zainab radiallahu anha. The eldest was Zainab radiallahu anha. She was married to Abul As bin Rabi. So the daughter, Hazrat Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha, is asking Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, after I pass away, I want you to marry my sister's daughter, Umama bint Abil As. You say, but they hide that from the books, they take it out. Why? Because that proves that there was no hatred. The Sahaba did not oppress the Ahl Bayt, and Ahl Bayt did not hate the rest of the Sahaba. And it also proves that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had daughters other than Fatima Zahra radiallahu ta'ala. Because Fatima said, I want you to marry my elder sister, Zainab's daughter, after I pass away. And 1 week later, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu married her. Then later on, after Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu passed away, he married the widow of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu now, Hazrat Asma bint Umays radiallahu anha. Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he had a son, Muhammad, from this Asma bint Umays radiallahu anha. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam passed away, he was only 2 years old. Actually, he was born in Hajjatul Wada, right? 2 years old, he was a couple of months old. Then Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he passed away. This Muhammad bin Abi Bakr was only 2.5 years old. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he married his mother, the widow of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and Hazrat Ali brought up this child like his own son. And because of that, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, he remained with Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, even in the battle against his own sister, Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anhu. Muhammad bin Ali, he was like a son to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. And throughout his life, he remained steadfast in support of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. And he was, anyway, so this is the love. And now, one final thing which we say is that, listen, if you hate somebody, are you going to name your children after them? Do you go through the names, millions of names in England, Would you ever find Adolf? Would you find him? No. All the enemies that they perceive, do they name their children with those names? Would anybody, any fool, name their children from their greatest enemies? It's impossible. Every person, we name them after the people we love. How many people throughout the life of Hazrat Maulana Yusuf Sahib, Nawwarallahu Marqadahu, once his students and the graduates, once they got married, numerous of them, they named their first child Muhammad, the second child Yusuf, after our Hazrat. You do that. You love somebody, that's what you do. Our Hazrat, when he had sons, the first son he named, the first eldest son, is named Muhammad, and the second one was after his father Sulaiman, because his father was Sulaiman. So that's what we do. We name those people who we love. When the children are born in the family, that's what we name. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, from his numerous wives, he had a son called Abu Bakr. This Asma bint Umama bint Abil As, her eldest son, he was Abu Bakr. He was named Abu Bakr. After Hazrat, he named Abu Bakr. That's not all. In Karbala is regarded as a holier battle than even Badr and Uhud by the Shias. They claim Karbala is the bedrock of Islamic resistance. If not for Karbala, Islam would have been wiped out. They make all these claims on their forums and in their books. And Karbala to them is the greatest battle ever. And Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu, he gave the greatest sacrifice ever. That's why they do all this matam and this and that, and centuries later, they still remember that as the greatest injustice ever done to any individual in the history of the world. That's how important they take Karbala. What they fail to mention is Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu wasn't the only son of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu that passed away, or that became shaheed. The very first was Muhammad bin Ali. And when the battle took place, the first martyr was Muhammad bin Ali, the second was Abu Bakr bin Ali, the same son of Umama bint Abil As radiallahu anha. Allahu Akbar. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu's beloved son, who is called Abu Bakr, he is being martyred before Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu. And one great thing about those 9 sons of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu who were martyred on the day of Karbala. Do we know about any other than Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu? This is the injustice. They want to hide it because that shows the love and the sacrifice that the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that the people, the Ahl Bayt had for the rest of the Sahaba, and the Sahaba had for the Ahl Bayt. From the 9, one was named Abu Bakr, one was named Umar, one was named Uthman. SubhanAllah. Abu Bakr is your enemy. Astaghfirullah, he oppressed your wife. He didn't give her his all claims made by the Shia. He didn't give her inheritance rights. He didn't do this to her. She was so angry at him that she never talked to him. And it just twists the words. Even if these words were true, what the narrators write is that she came, she asked for her inheritance. She was told that prophets don't leave behind inheritance, and then she did not touch the subject again. In Arabic, it says that she did not talk to him about it. See that? As Fatima was so angry. Say that. And when did she have the opportunity to come and talk to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu? Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu was in the masjid, he was inundated. She was ill in her bed. They were friends. She didn't attend the majalis of the Sahaba. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to say, that there is a narrative. One narrative is there was great love, and these incidents, they prove it. Incidents of intermarriages. and incidents of naming the children Aisha, naming their children Zainab, naming their children Hafsa, naming their children Abu Bakr, naming their Ahl Bayt. Almost all of them, Hazrat Hassan radiallahu anhu named his children Abu Bakr and Umar. Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu named his children Abu Bakr and Umar. They had numerous sons. And the first ones, they would first of all name them Muhammad after Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then the second would be named Abu Bakr and the third one would be named Umar. It's there in the history books. If they hate it, I've read it, I've heard it. They're trying to answer this. No. That was Abu Bakr wasn't. It was a very, very common. It wasn't even a name. His name was Abdullah. It was a title. And it was very, very common. Every family had an Abu Bakr. And Umar, every family had an Umar. And Uthman, subhanAllah. In order, every family had, and it wasn't anything to do with the respect and love that Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu had for his three predecessors. For Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu. You look at it and it just doesn't, they tried, as I said, mental gymnastics here, they're trying to answer, but alhamdulillah, history books, the facts, that's what I'm saying from day one, the narrative put out by Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it corresponds with the Quran, it corresponds with the life of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it corresponds with the life of the Khulafai Rashidin, and it corresponds with history, and with actual factual things on the ground. Even the Shias, did Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, despite all, this question to the Shias, did Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu not take over as a leader? Allah promised that you will inherit the world. Did the Sahaba not inherit through the Khilafat of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq and Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu? Allah made promises, those promises were fulfilled through the Sahaba, and you're saying that no, Hazrat Abu Bakr and Hazrat Umar, they overpowered Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they overpowered Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, they overpowered all the super, what do we call it, heroes and the super strength. Because on the one hand they believe, but that's the question. When people ask that, are the Shias Muslims? How can somebody who regards Hazrat Ali as controlling the universe, controlling every atom in the universe, how can we regard somebody who thinks that Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu, he has the power to give children? Never mind Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu. Once I saw a video, this guy, Malango, whatever, in Pakistan, whatever they call him, Zakirs. This guy, no beard, no nothing, and he looks like, wild man. He's there saying that, Dhul Janah. Dhul Janah is, Janah means wings, and a horse with wings. They claim that Hussain radiallahu anhu, Allah had granted him a horse with wings, Dhul Janah, and then they worship it in the same way that the Christians worship a cross. He goes, this woman, she came to Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu, but Dhul Janah was outside. So she went to Dhul Janah and she said that, please grant me a child. And then, through the barakat of Dhul Janah, she was granted a child. When Dhul Janah, and then the guy just starts screaming, when Dhul Janah has such power, when he's just only a horse of Hussein, what do you think the power Hussein holds? And they have it in their books. Nobody will be allowed to enter into Jannah until Hazrat Ali gives permission. Hazrat Ali will be standing on the gates of Jannah, and only those who he allows. And then they question, do you think he's going to allow Abu Bakr and Umar and Aisha and them, his arch enemies, to enter Jannah? It's completely messed up. So our narrative is, alhamdulillah, and we proved it through the different sessions, that there were intermarriages, there was great love, and Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he supported 100% the Khilafah of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Once, his complaint was addressed, which was, why were we, in other words, they were busy with burial of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The story is there where there was a fear of friction. The Ansar were on the verge of appointing a leader. Once they had appointed a leader and the Muhajirun would have accepted it, then they would have only led to civil war. To stop that, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, begged Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, let's go to where the Ansar are discussing appointing a leader and put a stop to it before things get out of hand. And that is a famous story. They went there, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he explained in great detail the maqam of the Ansar. But at the end he said that Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself has instructed, Al-A'immatu min Quraysh, your leaders will be from the Quraysh. And the Quraysh are the Muhajirun. And as Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he had no designs on Khilafat himself. He said in that meeting, he had Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu one side, Hazrat Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu anhu the other. He said, these are the top people of Quraysh. From these two, whoever you wish, accept as your leader. Hazrat Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, Subhanallah, Abu Bakr is amongst us and we're going to choose another leader? That's impossible. Abu Bakr, give your hand. Hazrat Abu Bakr was reluctant. Hazrat Umar radiallahu basically pulled it, and then he took the oath of allegiance. Then Hazrat Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah took it, and all the Ansar that were there took it. And then next day it was announced, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu sat on the pulpit and everybody took the bay'ah. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he was busy with the burial of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So, and then he was doing that such an important matter. Why we are the family of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. At least you could have called us. At least you could have waited until. You would explain. If you had waited, then there was a chance, every chance, almost any guaranteed that there would have been. Once you choose a leader, then that's it. You've already got two parties, and then to bring them back, it's almost impossible without force. And then he accepted it. And after that, he gave his full support to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. He gave his full support to Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. He gave his own daughter, Kulthum, his own daughter, from Hazrat Fatima al-Zahra radiallahu ta'ala anha into the nikah of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, which I've already mentioned. When we look at history, alhamdulillah, the love that was amongst the Sahaba, and the love is portrayed for somebody through marriage. They had intermarriages through calling your children, giving your children names after the people you love. Hazrat Ali did that. Hazrat Hassan did that. And then, just before, inshallah, this is the last thing on this. A lot of Sunnis are affected by this narrative, and they won't get affected by allegations against Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Umar, because the ahadith and what, alhamdulillah, they're well informed on that. But numerous people get affected by the allegations against Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, for example. Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was the brother-in-law of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But in our family, we have a brother-in-law. Is he not part of the family? Do we not show him as much love as we show the rest of the thing? Somebody, your wife's brother, is he a nobody? Habiba radiallahu ta'ala anha, binti Abi Sufyan. She was married to Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the daughter of Abu Sufyan. And Muawiyah was the brother of Habiba radiallahu anha, I believe. Anyway, one of the wives of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Hazrat Muawiyah is a brother to such a wife. He used to come. He used to visit Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam regularly. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to love him. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because he was educated, he knew how to read and write. When wahi would come down, Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, if he was available, called Muawiyah. I want him to come and write the wahi. Subhanallah. Wahi, the Quran we have, parts of it has been written down by Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala. And unfortunately, the Sunnis, they're falling prey to this that no, Muawiyah, na'udhu billah, he was an enemy of the Ahl Bayt, and he did this to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was the governor of Sham. Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, his cousin, from his clan, his tribe. Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was martyred. Hazrat Muawiyah is saying that subhanallah, goons and hoodlums can come into Medina Munawwara, they can surround the house of the Khalifa, and then they can murder him and they can martyr him, they can cut his head off whilst he's reading Quran. And you're not taking any revenge and you're not capturing them. Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, only one thing. Produce the murderers of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, give them the punishment then subhanallah, I'm ready to accept it. I'm ready to accept you as a Khalifa. Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, what had happened was, after that, the chaos, they had joined his army. And they had penetrated his army. And Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu at the same time, because of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu's shahada, Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anhu was Hajj, numerous Sahaba, senior Sahaba, they went to her and said, subhanallah, the Khalifa has been martyred, has been murdered, and nothing is being done about it. Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, people gathered around her. She was the mother. She was their mother. And then, so Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he's there now making preparations to fight Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, her army. Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, she admitted it later that I was wrong. She did istighfar and she freed numerous slaves for her mistake. It was a mistake. It happens when it's murky, very hard to work out what's the truth, and especially in those days, it's impossible. And the battle itself, how it took place, as Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha had made a firm intention the night before, after having talked to the representatives of Ali radiallahu anhu, that no, it's wrong, and she realized. She remembered a prophecy of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When you hear the dogs barking of this place, then remember that, turn back from there. Whatever, anyway. So then, Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anha, she made a firm thing that, tomorrow I'm just going to basically tell everybody to go back home. At night, what did they do? The people they knew, they heard about it. So these same murderers and rebels, they came into and in those days, it was, at night, nobody feared any attack. And before they would attack, they would make it known. They penetrated and this side started throwing, I was on that side, and they started replying. And suddenly, it's all out war. It's very, very hard to come to, it's very easy for us now, 1400 years later, to say, this should have happened, this should. Anyway, Hazrat Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu anhu. So Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he told Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu that once my khilafah is mustahkam, once my power is basically established, then I will root out every single killer of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala. That was the point of view. Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala, subhanAllah, was a Khalifa. For him to say, it's not for us to say. But they were the Sahaba, they were same age, they were on a similar level. Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu had been the governor of Sham from the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. He was very, very powerful in his position. Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu trusted him, Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu trusted him. So it wasn't Hazrat Uthman, Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala who wasn't somebody just picked off the streets. He was from the Quraysh. He had great power, he had power in his own thing, he had great ability. And then, one question which they have no answer to is, after Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was martyred, all of Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala's men, including Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu, younger brother of Hassan, they took Hazrat Hassan radiallahu anhu as the Khalifa, as a successor to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was the Khalifa for 6 months. He made preparations. After Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu was made shaheed, then obviously it took him months 4 or 5 months to gather the army again, and once again go to Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and try force him to accept Hazrat Hassan radiallahu anhu as the Khalifa. They went 40,000-50,000 men. Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu had civilian. Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu had civilian. Then Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, obviously before the battle there were discussions, Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu sent a blank paper. Hazrat Hassan radiallahu anhu. Other than Khilafah, whatever he wants, I'm willing to give. So Hazrat Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to look after thousands of widows and orphans. So he asked for a certain, only for, not for his own thing, only that in Medina Munawwara especially, literally thousands of widows and orphans and the poor people, they didn't even know that Hazrat Hassan radiallahu anhu is actually giving this. So then Hazrat Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he accepted, Hazrat Hassan radiallahu anhu accepted Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu as the Khalifa, and he handed over power. Subhanallah, Hazrat Hassan has no problem with Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Hussain has no problem with Hazrat Muawiyah after that. And now, forget the Shias. This is to the Sunni. How can you badmouth somebody who Hazrat Hassan radiallahu anhu accepted as Khalifa? Hazrat Hussain radiallahu anhu, and then he ruled for 20 years. And that Islam that was spread in those 20 years, Allahu Akbar. The navy that was established in the time of Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, that's where the Prophet Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba doing jihad against Cyprus and that, all took place in the time of Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. That navy that he said, it existed for 7-8 centuries, and as long as that navy was in power, the Muslims were in power. So anyway, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the love of the Sahaba. They are all in Jannah, alhamdulillah, they will all be in Jannah. And Allah ta'ala make us part of that group, and Allah ta'ala remove all enmity and hatred from the hearts of the believers against the Sahaba. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wa sallallahu ta'ala ala khairil khalqi.